Hey everybody, welcome to the Videocraft Show. I am your host, John Santiago, and in this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky, I talk with Rob Abasolo, but viewers of his videos know him better by the name of his channel, Robuilt, not Robuilt, as some people tend to think. Rob focuses on the unique niche of tiny homes and unorthodox houses. He's actually still a relative newcomer to YouTube, having only started his channel at the beginning of 2020, but his channel exploded thanks to videos he made offering tours inside the tiny house properties he personally owns. In this conversation, Rob and I talk about a wide range of topics, including balancing YouTube and his responsibilities to his family and job, how he comes up with ideas for his videos, how he chose his niche, and much more. You want to listen to this episode. All right, you're listening to the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. Let's get to it. All right, Rob, thank you for joining me on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, happy to be here. This is my second podcast ever, so it is an honor.
What was that like on your first?
You know what, it was great. I actually recorded a podcast. I started a podcast about 7 years ago, and it never made its way to the podcasting platforms. We pulled the plug before ever it went live, so it was nice to be back behind the microphone.
What was the podcast about?
Well, it was called Straight to DVD, and it was basically a podcast where me and my host would pitch outrageously bad movie ideas to each other, purposely bad, and then at the end of that pitch, we would do an improv scene from that movie.
Dude, you should pitch that to like The Ringer or something, man. Like that
well,
seems like something Bill Simmons would want to do these days.
Well, neither of us had ever actually done improv before, so it was sort of like, dead in the water before it ever started just for that reason. And then the other host that was on that podcast had never heard a podcast before in his life. So when I was like, hey man, you should listen to podcasts so you can kind of prepare for what we're about to do, he'd be like, no, we'll figure it out. So between him not ever listening to podcasts and us not taking improv, it was a failure. One of my first failures that it's okay. I'm not sad about it.
Okay, well, this is kind of an interesting route to start with on our podcast that we're recording. It seems like you just have a really, I guess, exhaustive background in creative endeavors. We were talking before we started recording here about your day job. Your career is in advertising. You're a copywriter, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I went to school at the University of Texas at Austin, and I majored in advertising with a specialty in copywriting. So I've always had that creative bug in me, even just like right before college. Like I knew I wanted to do advertising because at the time I wanted to write jingles for commercials. And so for me, I was like, yeah, I think advertising. I didn't really know, but even beyond that, I've always been, the theater type and class clown, and specifically like, I would say one thing that really feeds into my personality type is like I'm a hustler, and I've always just tried to like make money as like a middle schooler or a high schooler, elementary school, whatever. Like I was always thinking of like creative ways to create that side hustle. So I do feel like creativity is just sort of like a really big part of me.
Jingles for ads. That's interesting. Like I feel like most people usually seem to think of going like I don't know, when it comes to creative stuff, like, oh, I'm going to write a book or maybe I'll be an actor. But it's really interesting to me that you had already had this interest in advertising at a young age. Why do you think that was?
Oh man, it's definitely because certain ads that I would watch as a kid on TV stuck with me throughout my entire life. Like there's this like 1990s like Sears air conditioning commercial that like I always quote with like my best friends. Jingles from like the Bagel Bites jingles, like popsicle jingles, like everything like that. Those always stuck with me as a kid, where I was like, I would watch the commercials watching Saturday morning TV and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I would memorize the words, and like I would always like reference them to friends. And then, I was always like the weird one where they're like, it's a commercial, who cares, But I think kind of as I got older, I felt like I got conned in a way, like subconsciously. So I was like, man, I'm going to pay it back and do that to someone else. I'm going to write a really terribly catchy jingle and make someone else remember that for their entire life. So it's kind of like revenge, I guess. It's petty revenge is what it is.
Do you know that Barry Manilow wrote like some of the greatest commercial jingles of all time?
You know what? I don't know that. Do you know any of the ones that he wrote?
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
No way, really?
He did also, I am stuck on Band-Aids because the Band-Aids stuck on me.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
they just got free advertising on this show.
Yeah, I know. You're welcome. You can Venmo me at Robuilt.
Exactly. Venmo, well, I should probably plug my Venmo at some point. Or actually, people just buy Video Husky editing service and we'll be straight away.
Yeah, we'll call it even.
Yeah, no, that was like the thing that came to my mind when you mentioned commercial jingles, because you should look this up, man. I think you would get a kick out of this. Go on Spotify or something, look up Barry Manilow Very Strange Medley. It's probably on YouTube also. He did this like at his concerts. Like, and don't ask me as like a 33 going on 34-year-old man why I have an interest in Barry Manilow. I just like his music.
He's got good music.
But he, it's so funny. Like when I heard that, I was like, he wrote that jingle. Like he wrote the State Farm commercial.
That Band-Aids jingle, that was a bop, man.
Yeah. Did you ever end up writing any? Like, do you do any of that at all in your day job?
No. There's so many misconceptions about advertising. Like if you watch a movie about advertising, like everyone in advertising, like for Mad Men, like for example, they're all drinking whiskey and they all have like poster boards behind them with like all the headlines and, all these catchy like phrases and all that kind of stuff. But that really is just like 25% of the process. There's also like account people that manage the clients. There are the clients. There are account planners that do all the strategy. There are producers. Like the creative part of it is just like one small part. And then even within that creative part of it, the jingle writing and all that stuff, unfortunately, is most of the time outsourced to like a different music house.
Gotcha. Okay. So then what are some of the things that you're writing now in your day job?
Yeah, so, whenever I first started, I was writing for Gatorade, and that's kind of how I cut my teeth. I was writing for Gatorade Social. So anything that you would see on their Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, a lot of the times I wrote that for the 3 or 4 years that I worked there. And then when I moved to LA, I went to a different agency, and I was working on Sonic and Old Smoky Moonshine. And then right after that, I was there for about a year. I moved over to the agency that I'm at now, where I primarily write for Hyundai. And I'm on the Hyundai social team. So again, a lot of the stuff that you see on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I most likely wrote it. There are a couple other writers on staff that also work on that. So I would say if you're like on the Hyundai Instagram channel and you're reading their copy, there's a 33% chance that I wrote it.
Gotcha. So you're not necessarily the social media manager for any of these accounts. You're not having to like make sure the posts go up. You are just the guy that is creating the copy for the captions and the titles and the headlines for each post.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We have a community manager. Well, we actually have 2 community managers that actually do all that. So again, there are so many jobs on my team. I would say there's maybe like 15 or 20 people. And they all do different jobs, So yeah, I'm working a lot on the Hyundai kind of social side, but occasionally I'm brought in for different cool projects. Like, if it's Super Bowl season, I might get to work on that and pitch against all the other writers or art directors like in the agency. So, I haven't made a Super Bowl commercial yet, but one thing that I really like about my agency is that they ask, I'm allowed to pitch those ideas and come in I have a seat at the table basically whenever all that stuff is being created.
Awesome. I wonder how much of your background as a copywriter and advertising, how much of that helps you as an independent creator yourself. Obviously you're having to create thumbnails, you're having to write catchy titles that people click on, you're having to write copy for the descriptions on your YouTube videos. Like, do you find that has helped you at all in attacking and even like the strategic perspective of running a YouTube channel.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Being in advertising has been key to my personal success on YouTube because in advertising, you know, you think that you write a commercial, and if that commercial is good, a lot of the people say like, or a lot of people will believe that once I write it, right, then it's just like, oh, it's good, let's go make it. Well, unfortunately, that's not how advertising works. You have to have internal meetings with your creative director. They give you edits, and then you change it, and then you have to go to your entire team, present it to them. They have feedback, and then you make those edits again, and then you go back to your creative director, and then you go to your client squashes it down, and you start all over. And basically, you have to have very thick skin in advertising because like you're always told that your ideas are not good or not good enough or need improvement. It's not like a negative industry, but it's definitely not one where they're pumping you up. It's most of the time, I would say like 99.9% rejection on everything that you write or come up with. And it's like that 0.01%, when that gets made, it makes your job worth it because it's so hard to get it made. So if you ever actually get to that point, it's really something to be proud of. But with all that said, because of the extraneous process to actually get something made in advertising, not only do I have super thick skin whenever YouTube people are like hating in my comment section, but also like I know how to poke holes in pretty much every single aspect of the creative process. So whenever I'm in an edit, I say, well, it doesn't really connect this way, or there's a little bit of a disconnect from that segment to the intro that I recorded 3 minutes ago and all that kind of stuff. So for me, being in advertising has really refined my kind of creative process. It's made me a little bit snobby against myself, unfortunately, and I feel like it definitely feeds into like my content is never good enough. But at the end of the day, I'm never super happy with my content. And then, I'll put it on YouTube, and sometimes it takes off, and I'm like, man, I really did not like that video. And it's just because of how hypercritical I am as a creative mind.
Is it strange for you to go through that? Because I imagine like probably before you started your YouTube channel, you may have heard other people who had done creative endeavors on their own talk about that, how, oh, I made this YouTube video and I didn't care about it, and then it was the one that went viral. But then this one that I spent so much time on, I put a lot of thought into, that one didn't do as well. Like, is that, going back to my question, is it just kind of surreal now to be in that position to say, oh, I kind of get what they were saying now because I've gone through it myself?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I'll put it this way. When I first started my YouTube journey, like I started on an iPhone, and that's all you really need to get started, right? No microphone, just iPhone quality, right? And I did that for like 6 months or 5 or so months, and then I told my wife, I was like, hey, I think it's time. I don't want this to just be a hobby. I want to take this really seriously. Can I buy a Canon M50, which is like kind of like the starter, YouTuber vlogging camera? And she was like, yeah, I don't care. Go buy it. But I'm just like, I was so cheap. I'm so cheap as a person that it was really hard for me to cough up that $500. And I actually ended up buying it with points. And that was really hard for me. Like truly, even those 80,000 points, I'll never get them back. But I was like, let's do it. I bought that camera. That was the day that I was like, I'm going to take this really seriously. Like I want to do this kind of thing. So as soon as I got that camera, I really felt like my production value ramped up quite a bit, exponentially, because I was just learning how to like use a camera and ISOs and white balances and all that kind of stuff. And so I really started spending so much more time in my edits. I mean, we're talking, instead of spending like 12 hours, I was now spending 16 to 20 hours because working with like raw footage was obviously just a different beast. And I started releasing videos that I was like, every video I was trying to get better and better and one up the video before that. So I started spending so much time on these videos, and they just weren't performing super well, And I remember I was looking at my stats, and I was used to getting like 50 views a day kind of thing. On some videos I would get 5 views a day or 10 views a day. And I remember looking at my stats, and one of my first videos that I ever uploaded on my iPhone, it's called Inside My $72,000 Tiny House in Los Angeles, California. That started taking off like, I think it had 2,000 views that day. And I was just like on my computer and I was like, what? 2,000? What? I was like, hold on. What? You know, it was like so much for me at the time. And I was so weirded out by that because it was such a random video where I was rambling. It was framed up from like mid chest up, like really nothing about this video was good, but it was taking off. And then the next day I had 4,000, and then the next day I had 16, and then 30, 40, 50, 60, just like all in a week. And it was just like, whoa, what the heck is happening? And I was so annoyed that that video took off because I worked so hard on like 4 or 5 other videos, like editing them. I was up till like 3, 4 in the morning just trying to get them perfect, and they had like no views. And I was just like, how is it that my worst video is outperforming my best video, right? But yeah, long story short, I definitely understand because, you know, you just never know when something is going to take off. You know, you just have to put your content out there, and once it's out there, you know, the world is your oyster. Anything could happen, and that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah, I think it probably when was that when it started taking off? Because it seems like it takes a little while to get some traction for some of the content that you post. But when was that? When did you start to notice that happen?
Yeah, so that happened around June 1st, somewhere around there.
I think that's around the time I discovered you, because it's funny that you bring up that video. That is the video that I found you on. I think, honestly, this is going to be interesting for you from like the viewer perspective, right? Like, I found your video, I think it was recommended. I was already watching like videos on tiny houses and whatnot. And your video just showed up on like the suggested videos, or it came up after it auto suggested. So I don't know what that was as to why it decided to do that then, like a few months after you had posted it, but it was interesting.
It does happen though. I mean, it really does. I mean, I know a lot of different YouTubers, like, you know, I talked to like Levi Kelly or Shelby Church, and they've talked about videos that they posted like a year ago that all of a sudden took off like they never imagined. And so for me, you know, it was just so weird and so surreal because it was around the June 1st mark that I was, you know, kind of first taking off. And like at this point I had been on YouTube for 6 months, and I was really, I mean, I was hustling. I was editing like every night, man, like every night from like 2 to 4 in the morning. It just depended on what I could really like give, you know, personally. And I was like so defeated a lot, but I was like, I'm serious about YouTube. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I don't care, you know, what this takes. And so for 6 months, it was my goal to get 1,000 subscribers. Like, well, no, I didn't put a time frame to it, but I remember thinking, when I get to 1,000 subscribers, I will have arrived. You know, that to me, that was my personal goal. And I got to 1,000 subscribers on June 18th. And it's because around the June 1st, the first week of June, somewhere in there, it started taking off because it was getting so many views. I just started getting like all those first 1,000 subscribers super fast. And I remember June 18th specifically because that was the day that I got 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch time hours on YouTube, which are the requirements needed to get into the YouTube partnership program where you can actually start monetizing your channel. So that day was very special to me. And I remember I hit 1,000 subscribers and I was like, I did it. You know, like I arrived. Like I set a goal for myself and I made it happen, and I was so proud, you know. And I remember thinking like, I guess my next goal is 5,000 subscribers. And I remember like my business partner, you know, I said that on Instagram stories, and he reached out and he was like, dude, that's going to come so much faster than you think. And I was like, yeah, 2-3 years, whatever. Like 6 months, it was 1,000. So let's just keep it going. And 5 days later, I hit 5,000 subscribers. And it's because that video took off and set off a chain reaction with all my other videos. And so I got to like 10,000 subscribers like 5 days after that. And it's because I remembered taking off, and I was like, well, I gotta put more content out. Like I have to do it, right? And so I went out to Joshua Tree, California, and shot a video of my other tiny house, which was titled "Inside My $165,000 Tiny House." And like the moment that I posted that, I scheduled it for like 8 a.m. in the morning, and I woke up at 8:30, and I looked at my phone, and it had 2,000 views, which was like insane at the time because I was used to seeing 50 views whenever I posted a video. And I turned over to my wife and I said, "Babe, I did it. I think I'm gonna go viral. I think I'm gonna go viral. I'm gonna do it finally, you know." And I was like so giddy about it. And that day, that video got like 80 or 90,000 views. And so I got to like 15,000 subscribers, like, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks after hitting 1,000. And then right around that time, I think it was on June 15th, YouTube reached out and said that they were going to make me creator on the rise. And, that was where they featured me on their homepage, on their trending page for 24 hours. And that was the day for me where I was like, okay, I'm doing this. Like, I'm serious about YouTube. This is what my life is going to be.
So there's so much there that I want to unpack with you.
Yeah.
I want to touch
and scene.
But it's so fascinating and honestly so cool. And I hope anybody listening to this just, they take some inspiration from that. I want to touch on first the last point that you made about being named a YouTube creator on the rise. Mm-hmm. Did they just message you in your YouTube inbox? Did it look like an automated message? Was it from like someone on the YouTube team personally that reached out to you? What was that like?
Yeah, let me see. Sorry. I'm trying to find that email because I, A, would like to read it, but B, relive it a little bit. But that's okay. Basically, they reached out in a very random email to me. And they said, here it is. Got it. I found it fast enough we don't have to listen to too much silence here. All right. YouTube creators sent me an email and they said, Robuilt, you're a star. You're the next creator on the rise. And then it's kind of like a little celebration emoji here. And it said, we'll let you know as soon as you hit the Explore tab where you'll be featured for 24 hours. Until then, please keep it under wraps. Prepare to be in the limelight and get ready to spread the word. And, this was at like 7 in the morning. I'm not a morning person. For me, waking up is really hard. I was waking up at like 8 or 9, but I remember I just rolled over and I happened to see it. And I was just like, oh, my phone's broken. I had no idea what this was. I was trying to I was rereading it and I was reading it. And I was like, I think this is not a message that they spam out to a lot of people. I think this is actually like a big deal, And I remember just laying in bed oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. I'm just like a regular dude. What? I could not believe it. I was shook. That would be the easiest way to say it. But basically they were like, don't tell anybody for 24 hours. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And I was like texting all my friends and I was like, guys, you'll never believe it. YouTube said I'm the creator on the rise. And then they were all like, texting me back and saying, yeah, duh, of course you are. But they thought that, it was like a general just statement that YouTube made. I was like, no, it's like an actual accolade that they chose me to be like on their trending page. And they were like, oh my God, that's so cool. So yeah, man, I mean, that day I was just doing as much research. And I remember I was like, YouTube creator on the rise. What is it? Will I get subscribers? Will I make money from it? I had no idea. And then the next day, at 24 hours later, I was on the YouTube homepage.
So what impact did that have after you made the YouTube homepage as a creator on the rise?
Man, so that day I went from 18,000 subscribers to 25,000 subscribers. And my videos, I think I got 200,000 views that day. And which is significant because at that time I was monetized. And remember, I got monetized June 18th. So I thought I was going to be making, $11 a month kind of thing. But because all my videos took off, I started off with $11 on my first day. And then the next day it was 15, and then 20, and then 30, and 40, and 50, and 60. And I remember I was just in awe, that I could actually make money on YouTube. And then by the time that I was actually creator on the rise, my first YouTube paycheck was so big from all the views that I got just from that prior month that I was like, I'm quitting my job. You know, like I was like, this is it, I've done it. But unfortunately, that's not really how YouTube works. It's not like you just consistently get that big fat paycheck every month. Like you really do have to work for it. You have to keep uploading content, keep putting out quality content, and you basically have to earn that money. But I was young and naive. I was 6 months into it, which was only 4 months ago. But, you know, I was still kind of learning that in order to make money on YouTube, I had to kind of put that content out there. But for that day, I mean, that was, you know, and I have a video about this, but that was the most money I've ever made in a single day. And it was the most views I ever got in a day, and it was the most subscribers I ever got in a day. And yeah, I mean, everything about that day was so special to me.
So going back to one of the things that you talked about a little bit a moment ago in terms of wanting to do this essentially, no matter what. I mean, how important is it to just enjoy the process first and foremost of creating and making stuff? Because like you said, you were doing this for 6 months before you had invested in even getting a camera beyond your iPhone, right? And it wasn't even like you were making money yet from this. So how important is it to kind of develop, I guess, a discipline around, you know, your creativity and wanting to do this?
I mean, it's the number one most important trade, or sorry, it's the most important quality needed in a channel is the enjoyment of the channel. Like I am in a YouTube group on Facebook called like Small YouTube Boost or something like that. And there's 200,000 members in there that are desperately trying to get like YouTube famous, right? And they're all like, hey, please, I need to make so much money. And like so many people get into YouTube because they think that they're going to become millionaires, right? They think they're going to be like Graham Stephan and make like $50,000 a month kind of thing. And it is possible. But what I always say to people, if they ever ask me for advice or my thoughts on starting a YouTube channel, you cannot do it for the money. Like you cannot. And I know that sounds, I don't know, not hypocritical, but odd for me to say because I am making money on the platform now. When I got into YouTube, I literally thought I was going to make enough money to buy one Chipotle burrito every month. And I was literally like so happy at the idea. I was like, man, if I could get like one Chipotle burrito with like double chicken, like that would be like so sweet, dude. You know, like I was like so like that was my goal, right? And so that's why I always said like $11 a month, like whatever. That's like double meat right there, you know? And you know, so I always say like you can't get into it for the money because unfortunately the chances are you most likely won't make a lot of money on YouTube. Like you have to really work for it and grow that audience and put out quality content. Only then can you expect to make some money, but to make like an entire living on it is really, really difficult unless you pour like everything you have into it. And so because of that, if you just ignore the money part of it and you say, I'm not going to make money on YouTube, that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I want to create content and I want to share my life with people and I want to share my unique concept, envision, or whatever it is that their respective channels are. If the money is out of it and it's all about just creating that product that you want to show people, then you're going to be so much happier because if you're chasing money, you're just going to end up quitting YouTube a lot faster because it could be years before you ever get monetized. You know, for me, I got monetized in 6 months. Okay, I worked for it. But honestly, I got monetized because the YouTube gods decided to, you know, promote that one video in the algorithm, and that changed everything for me. But did I deserve it more than any other random YouTuber that, you know, was creating content, was also up until 4 a.m., was putting out 3 videos a week versus my one? Like, no, totally not. Like, it's luck. And for me, I consider YouTube like 99% luck at the beginning and 1% talent, and then that sort of starts to shift to the other side. Whereas now for me, I think it's like, you know, 10% luck and 90% talent because I've already established myself as a YouTuber. So if I didn't enjoy what I was doing, then I just wouldn't do it, you know? And for me, I was definitely getting to the point where I was reaching my breaking point because I was up every night editing. And, you know, I was up until 2 or 3 in the morning editing, and then working a full-time job, managing my Airbnb business. I have a newborn, and, you know, doing consultations, which is another business that came out of YouTube. So for me, editing was just kind of really starting to eat at my soul a little bit. And I decided that, you know, I was making money on YouTube, but I was like, you know, the money's cool. I would rather just give all that money to an editor. And if I don't make a single cent from YouTube ever again, that's totally fine with me as long as I have an editor. And ever since then, my life quality has been so much better because, you know, I have an eye for editing. I'm good at the concept of it, but I'm not good at the actual like nuts and bolts of like getting in there. And what takes me 16 to 20 hours takes my editor 6. So for me, it's just... sorry, my daughter's in the background eating. But for me, it's, you know, hiring an editor has really changed my workflow and my quality of life just because, yeah, I don't have to stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning anymore. And that's a beautiful thing.
So you work with you're working with a freelance editor. Tell me about the process of finding that editor and even determining what rate to pay him or her.
Yeah, so you know what? It's really funny because I would post all of my kind of editing, you know, woes and processes on Instagram stories, and I would always say like, you know, it's 4 p.m. It's 4 a.m. I want to go to sleep so bad. And I would have a lot of videographer friends that would reach out on Instagram and say like, hey, you know, if you ever want me to edit your stuff, you know, like, let me know. And I'm always like, oh, you don't want to edit me because, like, at the time, like, whenever, like, okay, let me give you an example of what an intro looks like, all right? You're gonna see a peek behind the curtain whenever I record my intro, like, literally anything, whenever I'm recording anything, this is how it goes. Ready? Hi, welcome back to another episode of Rob. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Rob. Why am I saying it that way? Hi, welcome back to, you know, and I do that every single take. And so you have to sift through, like, literally any sentence that I say on YouTube is that. Like, if you, like, it sounds cohesive when I'm walking around and stuff like that, but it's not, right? And so this, because I was just so unused to jump cuts, I didn't really understand the concept as much. I was just, you know, kind of new to being able to like edit that stuff out, right? So I was always just trying to nail that like perfect take. And because of that, I was like always editing much longer than I needed to. So when my friends were reaching out, I was like, oh no, you don't want that. You don't want that. Well, my editor now, he's a really good friend of mine. We interned at one of my first ad agencies, like, you know, coming on 10 years now. And he was like, man, I'd love to edit your stuff like just one time. And I was like, you don't want that? And he's like, no, man, really, like, he's like, I work for an agency where I edit for casinos all day, and this would be such a refreshing, you know, like different thing to do, right? Because at this point is where I was really starting to kind of embrace editing a little bit and trying to have a little bit more fun with it versus just being a talking head. So I was trying to have on-screen annotations and supers and B-roll and all that kind of stuff. So I think once he saw that, he was like, man, please, like, it would be really, really, really awesome if we could do that. If we could try this one time. And I was like, all right, if you're sure, if you're like not just saying that as my friend and you like actually want to do this, let's try it. And we did it, right? And like, I remember I was so confused. I was like, how can I hire an editor? I live in LA, he lives in Oklahoma City. It doesn't really make sense to me, like how we could make this work. And, you know, he just kind of walked me through the process. He was like, dude, it's all good. Just like upload it to Google Drive. Give me access. I'll download everything. I'll put it in the, you know, what does he use? Premiere Pro. Well, I'll let it render. I'll edit everything, and I'll send you stuff on Dropbox. And I was like, all right, seems easy enough. Well, when he edited my first video, it was like inside of a $200,000 spaceship, tiny house spaceship or something like that. That was the first video that he did, and I remember thinking like, damn. Can I say damn? Sorry. Dang.
No, you can say damn. It's all good.
I was like, damn, this is so good. Like, he color corrected my footage. He like had really nice animating supers. He had funny B-roll, and I was just like, I mean, I need an editor. Like, because whenever he was like, he did that one for free. And I was like, dude, would you consider editing for me full time? And he was like, yeah, dude. He was like, I thought you'd never ask, you know? And I was so thrilled because I remember I was watching that video and we were watching it on the couch with my wife for the first time. And my wife was even like, can you just get him to do all your videos? And I was like, first of all, ouch. Second of all, I 100% agree. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning of that. So, you know, I didn't have a huge budget, you know, and I asked him like what he would be willing to take. His freelance rate was like $75 an hour, which is, you know, a very fair rate for someone of his caliber. He's a professional videographer, editor, all that kind of stuff. And so he was just like, I was like, what would you charge? And he was like, man, my rate is $75 an hour, but for you, I want to get in like on the ground level. I want to do this thing with you and build your channel. He's like, I'll do it for $20 an hour. And I was like, what? Are you really? And he was like, yeah, it's not about the money. He's like, that's just a little something to buy gear. He's like, I just want to be a part of this. And he was like, but you have to promise me that as you grow, you know, we'll negotiate the pay and all the costs and all that kind of stuff. But you know, if the day ever came where he was like $75 an hour, I would be like, yeah, that makes you deserve that. You're a really good editor, you know? For me, I never understood the impact of an editor. And I feel like I know that you guys are an editing service. So I'm not saying this just because of that, but really, truly, as a creative, being in the editing bay with an editor that crafts the story that I come up with, like whether it's in advertising, well, specifically in advertising, like I never understood how much a story has, you know, is in the hands of an editor because they have to sift through like 100 hours of footage and pick out the different footage to put on the timeline in non-linear formats, right? And, you know, I kind of understood that in advertising, but then once I kind of applied it to my YouTube, you know, content, that's when I was like, I mean, an editor is worth their weight in gold because, you know, it helps me creatively to see someone else edit my content. And now, because when I'm editing my content, I'm so wrapped up in all my little techniques and jokes and all that kind of stuff that I really kind of miss the bigger picture. But whenever Caleb, my editor, edits my stuff, he puts his own jokes in, and it's a very collaborative process. But whenever he sends me that first outline, I can watch it totally like with a new perspective and watch myself in a very different way. And the collaboration process, I think, has been such a pivotal it's been a very pivotal kind of change in my actual YouTube channel. So I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, I will tell you, man, like from that first video that I saw you, the one that you talked about, the inside your $72,000 tiny house, compared to the stuff you're putting out now, like you really can tell the difference. I was speaking to, you know, another YouTube creator buddy of yours, Levi Kelly, also in the same niche, and he had mentioned to me one of the things that he's noticing that, you know, people who follow his channel point out is that, oh, you have a tendency to say wow a lot. And I think it was in your video with him where you were touring one of your houses, and your editor had spliced together all the moments you had said wow, he had said wow, and then Owen Wilson saying wow. And I just like cracked up while I was watching that. And then there was another moment where it was, I forget which video it was, but you were doing, you know, another talking head thing and, you know, referencing stuff from the 90s. Like you and I are about the same age. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming, like, and you dropped in the more you know with the the NBC shooting star with your head on the shooting star. Like you wouldn't have been able to do that before yourself.
No, definitely not. Because that specifically, that edit was like, I knew I wanted that. And I remember because I remember I said, the more you know, just kind of joking, like improvising, ad-libbing or whatever. And when I saw it, he left it in the edit. And I remember I was like, hey man, can you just put the jingle of The More You Know on that? And he was like, yeah, no problem. And then when he sent me the new cut, he took it to the next level and like, you know, cut my head out and added the tracking to the star. And I was like, I mean, I don't even want to learn that. I can't even imagine how much time it took him to do that, you know? But it's so funny that for him, like, stuff that will take me hours takes him seconds sometimes, you know? And it's just because, you know, I don't know how to do that stuff. Now, I was trying to get better every single video, and I was learning how to do something new. That was always my personal challenge. Every new video, I would do something new or learn a new skill, like how to blur something out or how to do a certain kind of transition or anything like that. So for me, it was all about one-upping myself. But then once I hired an editor, I was like, okay, you know, it's so nice to not be bogged down in that side of it, and I can really focus on my internal creative process.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much involved with producing content. I mean, the way that I even look at YouTube these days, or just any kind of content strategy, even if you're like running a blog, you kind of have to approach it like your own little media organization, right? Where there's so many moving parts. Like, not only are you having to deal with editing if you're doing that yourself, you're also having to come up with ideas for what to shoot, and then you're gonna have to plan out what you're gonna shoot, and then you have to actually shoot what you're going to shoot, right? So
you're giving me a little PTSD vibes right now, because that is every week. I mean, you know, we spend so much time going back and forth on the creative process. So my editor typically takes anywhere from 6 to 8 6 to 8 hours per edit, right? And it's like exhaustive because it's just going back and forth over like 2 days or 3 days. And then finally he gets it to me. I upload it to YouTube. I write my description. He does my thumbnails. I really spend a lot of time on the back end. Schedule. It's like midnight and I'm like, oh, I can go to bed. It's like, great. And then he's like, oh, hey, what's next week's video? And I'm always like, no, like I have to think of something else. Or we just finished this. Leave me alone, you know? But he like needs the time to edit. And so it's just like, as soon as one edit is done, I have like a day or maybe 2 days to rest. But for the most part, it's like one after the other. Like I just published yesterday's video, but I'm recording one tonight, like after this, because my editor needs the time. And now that he's editing for me, other people have reached out to him, and he's editing for like a friend of mine, and he's might be editing for other YouTubers. So now we have to actually be on a schedule, and like, you know, it's going to force me to be a little disciplined on this kind of stuff.
So what's your process of ideating stuff? So it seems like you, from what I'm hearing, you kind of just go on a week to week basis where you think of one idea and then try to execute it, or do you try to come up with like a pool of ideas and then plan out like a calendar of what you want to shoot, what you want to create far in advance?
Well, I'm flattered you think I'm that organized, but unfortunately, no, it's nothing like that. It is week to week, down to the wire every single time. You know, it's like I have a full schedule, man. Like, you know, being a YouTuber, if it were my full-time job, like my content would look completely different, significantly more consistent, and maybe there would even be more of it. But at the moment, like, you know, I'll tell you a little bit about my day. Like, it's, you know, I wake up at 8, I take care of my daughter until about 10. Then we have a nanny come by from 10 to 1 so that I can focus on my actual job. And then from 12 to 1, I have a consultation because I have clients now that reach out and they want me to teach them how to build tiny houses and start Airbnb businesses and everything like that. Then from 1 to like 5 or 6, I'm pretty much working. And then from like 5 and 6 to like 7, I hang out with my daughter and my wife. And then at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and 9 p.m., I do a consultation. And then from 10 p.m. to midnight, I'm responding to emails or, responding to YouTube comments or running my Airbnb business. So whenever you were reaching out to me, I'm sure you'll notice that a lot of those emails that I ever sent back were probably around midnight. And it's because it's the only time that I ever have to actually get back to people. And so for me, like, planning out my YouTube calendar and all that kind of stuff, like, man, I would love that so much. But it's not something that is feasible for me just because I don't have the time. So for now, it's a complete struggle bus to just get one video a week. But that's my goal to myself. That's my commitment to myself and to my channel. When I miss a week, which I've missed maybe 2 weeks in the last, 8 months, it really tears at me because I really feel like, like I let myself down. because in YouTube, consistency is the key. Consistency of quality content. So, don't post anything that you're not proud of or that you don't like, but which, has happened to me one time. I went out and recorded a video and I didn't post it on YouTube because I didn't like it. But for the most part, like, YouTube is a numbers game. You don't know when you're going to go viral. You don't know if you're going to go viral. It's most likely the videos that you least expect, right? And so for me, I was just like, I don't know. Sorry, my dog really likes new rugs. Hey, we got a new rug. Dogs rolling rugs? Sue me. Anyway, so for me, like, shoot.
It's all good. I can't. It should be fine on my end, honestly. We'll keep this all in.
Okay. Yeah. Great. This is great. We need the comedic.
It lets the people know that we're real, Rob.
Exactly.
Like,
you know what? We're not editing this out. We're not doing fancy bells. This is a peek into my world. But
yes.
Yeah. For me, like, YouTube is a numbers game, and you don't know if you're gonna go viral when you're gonna go viral, right? And so you just have to put content out there and see. You have to put it out there. You literally. Now, I'm going to drop a knowledge bomb for everyone watching and listening. You cannot go viral if you don't post a video. I know, and that one's for free. I won't bill you for that, but it really is true. I mean, unless you're putting content out there, you have no shot of making it, right? So that's why whenever people approach me about starting a channel or whatever, they're always like, what's your advice? What should I do? What do you want me to do? Put your first video up. That's it. That's the goal. Once you put your first video up, it gets so much easier from there, like so much easier, because you've already conquered the first problem, which is like overthinking it and trying to overplan and overshoot and overproduce and edit, right? If you can just get your first video out there, then I promise it's like so much easier. So for me, like, if I ever miss a week for that reason, I'm just like so bummed, because I'm like, well, I'm not going to go viral this week, which is a silly goal, but it's true. Like, I'm like, dang it. Like, I missed a shot,
Yeah, that's so critical to like anything creative, I think. I mean, even from my perspective, I have a personal blog and like writing stuff for that. Once I got into the habit of just like trying to publish something once a week, then it just became second nature for me to try and do it, And it's cool that you got started by just using your iPhone. Like, I think so many people have a tendency to think, well, I have to have like the best equipment. I have to have like great audio gear. I need to have like the newest Sony or Canon or Nikon or Lumix DSLR mirrorless camera in order to start. But if you're just getting started, you don't necessarily know how to use those tools yet, right? And so it can almost kind of help you. And I wonder if this was true for you, to just have those constraints on yourself where you're like, yeah, I'm just going to start with my iPhone and see what I can make from it from there.
Absolutely. So I think here's one of the truths about YouTube. I have started a channel. I'm doing okay. And a lot of people, reach out and they ask me, what's my advice? They want to start channels. I've convinced 4 people to start channels. Of all the people that have come to me and started their channels, I would say 50% of them never uploaded their first video. The other 50% of them uploaded 1 or 2 and then stopped. So, as much as I would love to say go out and buy a nice camera, go buy the Canon M50, whatever that is, most likely, like, you really have to, like, know if that's what you want, because I'll tell you what, whenever I first started a YouTube channel, well, actually, I almost started a YouTube channel, like, let's see, we're in 2020, 2017, 2018. I bought 2 GoPros and I bought a Canon Rebel T3i, and like, I was like, I'm gonna start this channel, and I spent like $400 or $500. I was like, asked my wife, I was like, is it cool if I spend $500? And she's like, yeah, just, I was like, it's gonna be for my dreams. Well, I never started that channel. And all that stuff sat and collected dust for like a really, really long time. I never used any of it, really. And that's because I just didn't test the concept out. And once I actually got behind the camera, I was like, this concept sucks or whatever, and I kind of walked away from it. So whenever someone wants to start a channel, I'm like, look, if you're serious about it, start on your phone, give yourself 10 videos, go through the editing process, learn why you don't like your phone, and then from there, you can think about buying a camera. I thought a phone was great. Like, it's 1080p, you can even shoot in 4K. I was like, why do I need a camera? I'll just get the new iPhone, right? Which, funny enough, is more expensive than my camera. But regardless, I was like, an iPhone should be fine. But as I started trying to get footage off of my iPhone and like trying to figure out the easiest way to get, really giant size files from my iPhone to my computer was so frustrating. And that's what a lot of the time was me waiting for files to come off of my iPhone and go onto Dropbox. Or I bought a little USB drive that connects to it. It was really taking me hours. And I was just like, I like went to my wife and I pleaded. I was like, please, you don't know what this is doing to my health. And she's like, I don't care. Go buy the camera. If you notice, the central thread here is I hate spending money. And so I always like, I'm hoping that someone tells me not to, because like I deeply want to like buy things, And that's what it was with the camera. I was like, I really wanted it, but I was like, I don't deserve it. Like, I haven't proved myself on my channel, And yeah, once I bought that camera, that was my commitment to myself that I was going to be a YouTuber, And so, but it was only through figuring out that recording on an iPhone is just not really feasible long term. It worked for 6 months, but past that, it was really eating into my workflow. So, fancy cameras and everything like that, they're nice, but you really have to learn for yourself, A, if you're serious about this, and B, if your concept works, because it may not work.
Yeah, how did you decide to make your YouTube channel focus on essentially now like tiny homes, DIY home improvement type stuff? I imagine that this is obviously something that you just have an interest in. We can talk about your house where you're at right now, and just what were there other options of niches that you were looking at before you decided to settle on doing this?
Man, I've always had random YouTube ideas and concepts, right? Like the first concept that I started was called ride over sharing. And it's where I would get in Ubers and Lyfts and interview the drivers. Because after years of talking to my Lyft and Uber drivers, I really felt like, man, they had such crazy stories, like every single one of them. And it was always like a drunken night, like after the bar or whatever. They don't want to talk to me, but I'm like, well, where are you from? And then they always had like crazy stories about, traveling to America. Like one guy I talked to traveled to America, but his mom stayed behind. And so he was Ubering to like save up money to bring her to America and all this stuff. And, I remember just thinking that night, I was like, man, this is a story to hear, right? And so that's how I started that concept. But after editing it, and I don't know, I didn't end up liking it. But that's like one concept I had, and then I had a whole notepad of concepts. Like another one was called Nick Cage Match, which is where I would compare really great classic movies to really bad Nicolas Cage movies and talk about which movie was better. And ultimately, Nick Cage, all of his movies would always win. Kind of like a video essay commentary idea. But I was like, never pursued that because I knew that would be like so much work to write those video essays, So I always had these ideas. But one thing that was always true to me and very consistent in my life was DIY. And I remember I went to lunch with a couple of friends and we were talking about YouTube and they were talking about how YouTubers make so much money or something. And I was like, man, I've always had this idea. I've been wanting to start a YouTube channel for like 10 years now. And I just wish I could, start like a channel that was like a weird, funny, quirky take on DIY. And they were all like, dude, that's awesome. You need to do that. And I was like, and they're like, no, seriously, that's like really cool. And I was like, you think so? They're like, yeah, man, that's right up your alley, dude. And I was like, all right, okay, sure. Well, a week later, I recorded my video, and then a week after that, I uploaded it on January 7th, 2020. So I started in the DIY space and, recording DIY stuff. That was like my channel. And then my tiny house, my $72,000 tour, that took off. And then my other small house tour took off. And then my other tiny house video took off. So that's kind of when I made that decision, like, all right, I'm probably not going to make it in DIY, but I could make a name for myself in the tiny house space.
So how did you get into the tiny house space in general, right? Like how did you learn about that? Because that is definitely like a very niche movement in itself. How did you learn about it?
For sure, man. I've just always been fascinated by tiny houses, and I bought a house here in LA, and at the time it was a lot of money for us. My wife's a teacher, I'm a writer. We're only gonna ever make so much money, right? And to buy a house in LA is just not realistic for most Americans, unfortunately. So I was looking for a way to house hack. I have a studio apartment downstairs, 300 square feet. When I bought this house, I put that on Airbnb, and that was, I was paying 50 to 75% of my mortgage with that. And then I had my tiny house in the back that I built because I wanted to, build something that I could, A, create more equity in, but B, pay my mortgage with, right? And so I, kind of started going down the rabbit hole, trying to figure out what I could build, what I couldn't build. And I wanted to build a tiny house for sure, but the one thing I kept finding was that building a tiny house would be impossible to permit. A tiny house on wheels. I had to do it on a fixed foundation, and that's kind of when I started talking myself into it. And I was like, well, the downsides of a tiny house on wheels is they're depreciating assets, whereas the upside of building it on a foundation, it's an appreciating asset on my house. And so that's how I kind of like got into it. I built the one in my backyard. Everyone loved it, and I thought, well, if everyone likes it this much, then I should do it again in Joshua Tree, California, but I'll do it better, and that's exactly what I did. And everyone loved that video too, and so I knew that I was building something special. I did not know that it was going to change my life the way it did.
Yeah, and you obviously enjoy traveling yourself, in terms of researching for this conversation. I checked out your Airbnb profile and had seen that you've traveled quite a bit around the world, been to a couple different countries, and then as a host, you've hosted around 300 plus people.
Yeah, more than that by this point. I mean, I think I just had my 2000th reservation or something like that, with all of my listings combined. Yeah, I you know what? I never got to travel. My parents, we weren't rich growing up. And the only kind of traveling we did was we would hop in a car and drive to Florida from Texas. Was really grateful for it. But I never got to be a travel bug other than going to Mexico during my childhood. And so I remember, a couple of years ago, about two or 3 years ago, I came home after talking to some friends, and I told my wife, I was like, man, we should travel. I know we're broke, but let's just make it a goal. We're going to go to 10 countries before we have a baby. Let's do this thing. And she was like, yeah, that sounds great. Sure. Because I was always the one that was like, no, let's not travel. It's too much money. And
your wife, man, sounds like she's the one who's always just like, yeah, awesome. Can I get this $500 camera? Yeah, whatever. It seems like it's so much more harrowing in your mind than it actually is for her.
It really is.
She's super chill about it, man.
she's literally down for anything, and I'm always the one that's so worried about money. So this is what I'm saying. Like, I'm always hoping that I'm like, yeah, what do you think? I mean, we can't get it, right? Like, we just can't afford it. And she's always like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, no, you're right. We shouldn't get it, Like, that's me. And so I was like, we're going to travel to 10 countries. So we did that. We did that in about 12 months. We hit up, I think, 11 countries. And in total, we went to 13 countries because we actually did a couple of repeats. So, yeah, man, traveling was really cool for us because, not only are you getting to learn the cultures and everything like that, but it was my goal to stay in really unique Airbnbs and find the coolest Airbnbs that I could around the world. And I'm honestly really sad that I didn't start my YouTube channel like 2 years ago, because I could have done so many, apartment tours and tiny house tours and Buddhist temple tours and, Airstream tours. Like, I've stayed at so many cool places that, yeah, I wish I could have recorded all that, but it's okay. It's all up here.
Yeah, you're making me feel like I should have done that, because I actually have traveled quite a bit myself the last few years, but I didn't. It's interesting when you're traveling, you want to. I know obviously it's such a huge thing now to be a travel influencer when there's not a global pandemic going on, obviously, but
for sure,
it's just there's something to being able to enjoy the experience while you're having it. And not be so focused on like trying to create some sort of content out of it. But it's great that you were able to do that. How much had that experience influenced you in terms of sharing your own household as an Airbnb host? Like, did you travel first and then go into Airbnb hosting, or was it the other way around?
I did Airbnb hosting first, and it was from there that I really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed sharing my house. Not my house, but actually I would have been down, but, that was one thing. My wife, she did have a line, and that line was like, no, we're not going to let strangers stay in our house. And I was like, but please, we could make so much money. But my studio downstairs, my tiny house, like, I was always down to like rent that out and have people like stay in that and share that experience, because I really felt like I was building a little bit of a community with that. So whenever I was going out to different Airbnbs, like I was always down to do a house share, if it was cool enough, or like, do something super unique or out there, because yeah, being an Airbnb host, like you meet so many people, and again, it's all about the story that they bring. And I just feel like meeting people is really just a breeding ground for like, such cool relationships and networking and all that kind of stuff. Like I have a couple of guests that I've remained friends with, and it's a really cool thing, because, like it's friends that I wouldn't have had without Airbnb.
Yeah, that is really like the cool thing about Airbnb. I remember a couple years ago, this is 2018, I traveled to South Africa and I was in Cape Town, and I stayed at this Airbnb, amazing Airbnb apartment right across the street from the beach in this town called Muizenberg, which is about like 15, 20 miles away from Cape Town. And my Airbnb host was this dude who I still text him to this day. He is
Nice.
he's just such a really interesting guy, and he was telling me how he kept a notebook and wrote stories about all the people who came through his house.
Nice.
And just to remember it. And he had just like some really fascinating stuff. I mean, just fascinating experiences that he was able to share with me. I mean, he had told me he became friends with the rapper Mos Def while he was living in South Africa.
Dude, I love Mos Def, man.
Yeah,
It's great.
That's a whole other story, but such an interesting experience, man, to like, host people on Airbnb and kind of get a taste of travel without even having to step
Totally.
out of your own home.
Absolutely. And you know what? At the end of the day, like, as much as I say I wish I would have recorded all that stuff that I went to go visit and everything, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it is kind of work, and, I did a tiny and unique showcase on my channel where I would go to different tiny houses. I'm still doing that, but I did my first 4 a couple of months ago, and I would get the place for a day, and, it really was a hustle the entire time. Like, we get there at 4, I set up the camera. My wife had, Isla. She would take care of Isla. And because there were tiny homes, we would all fit in a small space, and I would record. And then as I would walk through, she would have to like walk to the side to get out of the shot. And we were doing this, like struggling to get everything shot in those like 2-3 hours before sundown. It was really hard. I mean, it really wasn't a vacation. I remember like every single time after I like stopped hitting record, I was like, oh, I'm so glad to not like to be done, because that was really hard in tiny houses with no space with my wife and child, like, because Isla's a child, so she was like 7 months at the time, so she's just making noise, blabbering, clapping her hands, crying, everything, right? So I would be like, yeah, so as we walk into the kitchen over here, and then you would just hear like blah, 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 and then it'd be like, okay, so as we walk into blah, blah, and it was always interrupting me. It was really, really hard. And I remember I was talking to Levi about it, and sounds like, for him, it's the same thing. Like, because I was remember thinking like, oh man, he's Levi Kelly. Like, he's got it down. I watch his videos. They're so buttoned up. Clearly he gets in and he's like, has it all down, and he's in and out in like an hour. And yeah, I mean, it sounded like even for him, someone that's been doing it for as long as he has with his level of quality and everything, like, I thought it was, something that he's in and out, but he was like, no, man, it's tough. The 1-day stays are really, really, really hard. So if I was doing that on my 10-country excursion, I fear that a lot of that wouldn't have really been as fun as it was, because, focusing on a camera and making sure your batteries are charged and making sure that your mic is plugged in, all that kind of stuff, like, it does sometimes take away from the experience, or it can, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about here. I'm really curious about things that you've learned after having YouTube success, right? Like you've now gone through this experience where you were at 0. I mean, at the beginning of the year. You had nobody. You had just started, and now you're at a point where your videos are getting consistent views. You have a following. You know, you have people who are watching your videos. Are there any misconceptions about being a YouTube creator that you've corrected now that you are pretty successful on the platform yourself?
I mean, misconceptions. I don't know about misconceptions, but like the biggest thing that I've changed in terms of my workflow is having an outline. Having an outline is something that has really changed everything for me, because now instead of just winging it and like, you know, before it would take me 4 hours to just wing it, right? Where I'm walking around and planning out what I say. But now I have a little notepad and I just write it out in sections and I bullet point kind of what I want to cover and try to keep it as organized as possible. That cut everything in half. And then the other, I guess, misconception or thing that I kind of corrected for was that I was always trying to get like this 2-minute, you know, soundbite perfect in one complete like fell swoop, right? So that was one of the reasons why I was always like, hi, welcome to, hi, you know, like, because it just takes so long to actually get it right. Whereas now that I work with an editor, it's like completely different, because he's really good at doing jump cuts for me and match cuts and all that kind of stuff. And he actually gets into the science of the audio of it, where he lines up all my takes and he looks at which audio field like flows best with like the next clip, and he fades everything. And like, it was stuff that I didn't figure out on my own. So now that I know that he can pretty much just edit me out, then I'm just like, you know, then I just kind of roll with it and don't correct myself so much. But actually, I guess a misconception is that, you know, it has to be perfect. And I found that, you know, if I was aiming for perfection, then I was always going to let myself down a little bit, because I was never going to be perfect. So I think once I realized that I'm always going to fumble on my words and, you know, have a small lisp on a random word or a small like kind of like stutter on this word or whatever, right? Like now I just keep it in. Like, you know, like if you watch my videos, a lot of that stuff I keep in and I embrace it by having him, you know, like annotate or kind of like animate certain supers that kind of like get bigger or smaller with what I'm saying, because it's so much more fun, you know? Like I think trying to look all polished and everything is fun. It would look great, but having a little bit of a humorous edge to it, I think just makes me a little bit more relatable. And I think like a little bit more self-deprecation is always going to be a little bit more fun to watch than like trying to be like the buttoned up business guy.
Yeah, I would say that even just as a viewer of your channel, like that is one thing that I like about your content, is that you're a funny dude, man. Honestly, you've got some jokes. You know, if you want to go into making like comedy skits or something at some point, I think you might have a future in that as well, because you're a funny dude. So and it's good. Like that's one thing that YouTube allows you to do, or at least even creating content online, versus like the old way of making things for television and making things on radio and newspaper. Everything had to be so perfect and so formal, and people really appreciate when they get to see some of the flaws, you know, in what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in my earlier content, I was always trying to plan those jokes and trying to be funny and trying, you know, and that was always like the issue, is that I was trying too hard to like make it work. And, you know, it was really like say one take 100 times just so I could make that joke work. And then when I was editing it, I was like, it doesn't work. And then I would cut it out. And I would spend so much time trying to make it work and it didn't, you know. Whereas for me now, I'm like, all right, instead of trying to be funny, I'll just be myself. Novel concept, and I'll make myself funny in the edit if I have to, right? And so when I don't have to focus or stress so much about being comedic, it's a lot easier to be funny, because I'm not worried about pre-planned jokes, and I'm able to then jump in the edit and say, hey, you know, actually what I just said is not funny, but if we add in a random B-roll, you know, segment of an old lady crossing the bridge side by side, it's going to be hilarious, you know? And like now I really try to amp up kind of that B-roll supplementary comedy, because I just think that it's a lot easier to not be so forced that way, because, you know, we can experiment and we can cut it out if we need to. Whereas if I'm really trying to deliver a line a certain way, well, if I'm done recording it and I don't like the way it looks in the edit, I can't cut it because it's the only take that I got, you know?
I want to ask you now about like the business side of things, like both just from the perspective of YouTube and then really like starting with your Airbnb rental business as well. Like you have, I looked this up. You have several properties now, right? Like you have your tiny house in your backyard. You don't rent your studio apartment in your house anymore, do you?
Not anymore. No, I did, but then one of those guests was like, "Hey, I really like your place. I need a place to live. Would you consider taking me on as a long-term tenant?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
So that one's off the books, but then you still have you have you have two properties in Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
And then you have like a glamping site in Arizona, right? And then
Yeah, 5 unit.
I haven't seen this. I saw it on your Airbnb page, but you also have a chalet in Gatlinburg, Tennessee?
I do, yeah. I have a chalet that we closed on August 18th. There was almost a video of that when we went out to go set it up, but we were just like hammering, man. Like we got to the chalet, we were unpacking boxes and we were making it all work. There was like no time to shoot, and there was also like 8 people in the house, so it was never gonna work because I was always gonna be like, "Hey, can you get out of the way?" Like, you know. A video coming on that at some point, but yeah, I think at this moment I have 10 Airbnbs. I'm working on 12.
So with some of them, you have partners, correct? Or you have one partner, right? Like you're the one
It
in your
depends.
depends. Okay, so I imagine your house, like the tiny house in your backyard,
it's
that's
me.
just you. But like some of the Joshua Tree, like are both Joshua Tree properties partnered with somebody, or is it just the Casa Mariposa that is the one you have a partner with?
Yeah, just Casa Mariposa. That one is with the partner 50-50. Tiny house in Joshua Tree is just mine. My chalet is with separate partners. And then my 5-unit glamping experience in my Austin condo is with another set of partners.
Okay.
So, you know, I have different sets of partners. They're all really great. We all work with each other and we're all very collaborative. And I'm actually working on a couple of partnerships now because now that I'm on YouTube and people see what I'm capable of and like what I can produce, I have a lot of investors that have reached out and, you know, want to work with me. So I'm always like kind of working through new deals because I'm always trying to stagger my timeline to where when I'm done with this house or this Airbnb, this one is in the middle. I'm in the middle of the process for this other one, so that I always have something new to work on.
That's interesting. So people are reaching out to you now after seeing your content on YouTube about potentially partnering on investment opportunities for Airbnb rentals.
Yeah, you know, at this point, I'm not going to say it's an automatic no, but I do turn most people away because, like I said, I am a consultant on the side now from my channel. People pay me and to kind of coach them and teach them how to do this. And a lot of them kind of, you know, they come to me and they say, "Hey, what if we just partnered 50-50, you know, and you can do all the work, or like, you know, like you can be part of this or whatever." And I always say, as my job as a consultant, it's not my job to take your money and take half ownership. Like, ethically, I don't ever feel right about that. I'm like, look, you could just pay me for like 3 or 4 hours. I can teach you how to do this, and you can save tens of thousands of dollars over the long run by not giving me half of the ownership, right? And so for the most part, once I kind of talk people through that, they're able to understand like why I don't necessarily, because I feel like I'm taking advantage and I don't want that. But I have had a couple of people that have reached out to me. They have paid for the consultation specifically to offer me money as an investor. And so for those people, they have like no interest in actually getting consultation. They're just like, "Hey, I have $500,000. Will you create something with that?" kind of thing. So I'm more open to that type of stuff. But yeah, I'm always working through different random things. And yeah, I mean, if you look at my videos and you look at my ROIs and my cash on cash returns and everything like that, I think it's pretty easy to recognize that I have a lot of success with my formula.
How did you find some of your partners for the existing properties that you have right now?
You know what? They're all friends. Like, my first partnership was like 2 different people. One was my best friend. One was a really good friend from college. We started separate businesses, and I was always pinging back and forth with them. And I got tired of being the middleman on these 2 businesses. So I was like, "Hey, dudes, what if we all just came together and like, you know, merged?" And they were like, "Cool." So we kind of ran with the glamping idea and that Austin condo that we bought. But then I had my partner in Casa Mariposa, we were in improv together at UCB, and after a show one day, we were at a bar talking about how we want to create wealth through real estate. And, he's like, man, I have some money saved up. I'd love to do something. And I was like, I'm sorry, man, I don't have money, or else I would love to. And then he was like, no. He was like, I'll pay for it. I'll front the cash. You teach me how to do this. You teach me everything you know. Show me how I can do this on my own after this, and we'll be 50-50 partners. And I was like, yeah, sounds like a great deal, And then with my chalet in Gatlinburg, it's a friend from high school that we've just stayed in touch ever since high school, and we've been really good friends. And same thing, she's like, hey, I want to get, her and her husband wanted to get into vacation rentals. So, that partnership was also on the foundation of me teaching them how to do this and how to go out and kind of do it on their own without me afterwards. So honestly, like, it's a little easier to do partnerships with friends, even though it's not necessarily the most sound business advice to do business with your friends. But I've vetted them, I have vetted them through our history of friendship. Whereas with new partners and investors, there's so much due diligence needed that it's honestly a little more of a headache to take them on than it is to just decline them. And so for that reason, I'm always like, yeah, maybe, I like kind of turn most people down.
Gotcha. How about in terms of how your YouTube channel has impacted your Airbnb business? I mean, you mentioned now you're consulting, teaching people how to do this, paid consulting, but I'm really curious about how it's impacted just the vacancy rates of your Airbnbs. Have you noticed like an uptick? Have you had guests who are like, dude, I watched you on YouTube and I just wanted to book your place and stay there?
I mean, that's a really good question. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I think that I actually haven't had that many guests book because of YouTube. I have had maybe 3 or 4 people that have reached out and said, hey, I saw you on YouTube. I would love to stay here. Now, granted, a lot of people don't necessarily have the opportunity to say that because, like, in order to book, there's kind of like a pre-booking question on there. What does it say? It's like, what are you in town for? Who are you coming with, kind of thing. And they have to answer like, I'm in town for a summit and I'm here with a friend and another friend or whatever. So not everyone says like, I'm here with a friend, I'm on here in the summit and I saw you on YouTube. Like, no one really tells me that. So it is possible that I've seen some success from that, but given that most of my properties in general run at a 100% occupancy, then I would say that YouTube really actually has like a minor kind of uptick from like, it has a minor effect on my actual bookings.
Gotcha. And you're now making a course too. Like you're kind of trying to translate your consulting into just essentially an online course. What's that process looking like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I think Airbnb and glamping, it's like such an awesome way to kind of create financial freedom for yourself. And a lot of people keep that information very secret and don't want to, tell you that kind of stuff. And for me, I'm just like, man, there's plenty of space out there for a lot of us, There's a lot of money to be made. Like, it doesn't have to just be me. I really consider myself a regular person. And because of that, I was able to kind of create something for myself as a regular person. And so my goal in my channel is A, financial transparency, but B, to say like, yeah, I'm a regular dude and you can do this too if you want to, right? And so, I mean, like my courses were just kind of a way to bring that to my audience a little bit more because unfortunately, like not all types of content perform really well on my channel. And I can't teach people how to start like an Airbnb business or a glamping business. I can't teach them how to do that on YouTube in 15 minutes. It requires like 10 hours worth of content that would probably only be watched by 2 or 3 people. So for me, I was like, well, what if I could create a course or 2 courses, right? That, were 10 hours long. People could pay me to watch them, be a part of it, have access to me. And then not only would I have less consultations and get a little bit of my life back, but I could also make a livelihood on those 2 sides of the business and maybe quit my job, right? My ultimate goal is to quit my job one day, not right now, but one day I want to be a full-time YouTuber. Now, granted, I'm not going to make a killing on YouTube for a very long time, I think, so I have to think of other ways to create income. And so I have my Airbnbs I have YouTube, I have 2 courses coming out, I have consultations. And so between kind of like all that stuff, then I feel like I can have a really financially free life and flexible to where I can pretty much do anything I want. So right now I'm creating a how to start a glamping business course that's currently being edited right now. And then the other one is how the fundamentals of Airbnb and basically everything you need to know to start an Airbnb business. And I'm sure along the way I'll have other small little courses, but you know, it's something that it's all new to me. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and it seems like people care what I have to say. So I'm just like, all right, I'll do it. I'll put it out there and we'll see.
Are you just like looking stuff up online in terms of how to build an online course to kind of design your own?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, there's a couple of people on YouTube that I watch and they kind of coach you through it. And for them, they sell courses too. So they coach you and they give you tips. And then their goal is to like get YouTubers to then sign up for their courses on how to make a course and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of like the process, right? Like you want people to understand that you're credible. So for me, YouTube has been a really awesome creative outlet. But from a business opportunity standpoint, it's really, really cool because, you know, no one has to vet me or no one has to guess if I'm going to provide good content because they can watch my channel and figure that out for themselves. So if they watch my video about a yurt that I put out there and it's making, you know, I talk about the numbers that makes $50,000 and they like me and my approach to Airbnb, then they're more likely to buy my course because they're like, yeah, I like his method, his approach. I trust him enough to pay him money to teach me how to do this in a longer form. So for me, it's like, I'm very flattered that anyone would care, you know. But yeah, I'm researching it every day. It's something that I've really put a lot of time and effort into, but I'm super excited that that can actually be something that I do full time because I love helping people. My consultations are really, really great, but talking for like 5 hours a day, back to back to back, it's really hard. It's very hard on the old vocal cords too. So like, you know, if I could replace some of those consultations with coursework, then I feel like I can have a lot more time to create YouTube content.
Yeah, that's the one thing about consulting or even, you know, freelancing and whatnot. I've done freelancing in the past, and it's just it's not scalable, right? Like you there's only one of you, so like if you're having to talk to like somebody an hour, you need to sacrifice that 1 hour to talk to them. Whereas if you spent that same hour working on a course, working on material, recording it, talking about the same things, but then distributing it to them, to a bunch of people, then it's like, okay, now I'm reaching even more people, still teaching kind of the same things that I would do in like the one-on-one consultation, but you're able to do it at just a much higher level.
Absolutely. I mean, that's sort of like most of my consultations are how to build a tiny house in Joshua Tree, California. And people just want to know how to do it, right? Like I have a video that's like how much money I make out there. And so a lot of people just want to replicate that success. And man, I'm so happy that people would book me 10 to 15 times a week. Like truly, I'm very flattered. It warms my heart. But at the same time, every single day, I'm regurgitating the same information over and over and over again. How to permit, you know, who the realtor is going to be, where to look for land, like all that kind of stuff, right? And so as much as I love doing that and actually helping people, I always say to myself, well, man, if I could just like, instead of charging them for 1 hour, I could actually charge more for my consultations and charge less for my course. That's 3 or 4 hours and even more helpful. And people could just buy that and then hire me as needed after that, you know? So for me, it is a little bit of like kind of a balancing act. I don't think I ever want to leave the consultations because honestly, in a pandemic, talking to people face to face on camera is really nice from a social perspective. Like for my mental health, it's great. But man, yeah, after a day where I crush 4 consultations and it's like 10 p.m., I'm like, oh man, that was a hard day, you know? And then like having to record a content after that, like a YouTube video, it's hard. So like, yeah, if I can give people more value through my coursework, then I'm like, I'm going to be real happy doing that.
Yeah, man, I feel like you've gotten like, from my perspective, I feel like you're like 80% of the way there to get to this point where you can potentially quit your job because you've built the audience, right? Like you have 40,000 or now 50,000 subscribers, or do you even have more?
I have 45,000 as of today. Actually, I think now it's like 45,300. So not that I'm keeping track or anything, but yeah, I do spend a lot of time tracking that just because it's still surreal to me. I mean, it's still special to me. I don't know. I really try to cherish what I have and cherish the audience that I've built, and I'm very thankful for it. So I look at it every day, several times a day, and I think to myself, like, man, I am lucky to be here. I am so lucky to be here. Because, in 3 or 4 years, if things have grown for me and I'm a much, bigger kind of presence on YouTube, like, maybe I'll forget, and I want to, like, always remind myself to be thankful for what I have.
Yeah, and imagine again, you have those people, you have people's attention. I mean, you have my attention. I'm watching your YouTube videos. I'm a fan of what you do, so I just feel like there's a lot of opportunity there. Even if you don't, I think a lot of people, they do want to get to like 1 million subscribers or like
Mm-hmm.
5 million. I saw a video Mr. Beast posted a couple days ago. I guess he scheduled it like 5 years ago. It was him and he was in high
Oh
school.
yeah, dude.
And he said, if I don't have 1 million subscribers 5 years from now, like, and then look at where he is like 5 years later, he has like 40+ million subscribers. But it's I don't know. Have you ever heard of the concept of 1,000 true fans, or like the minimum viable audience?
Okay, I have heard of the book. I'm very familiar with the concept, which is if you cultivate and pour into your fan base, and you can create like 1,000 true fans that really kind of look up to you and they're loyal to you, they'll buy anything that you sell them, sort of like, I don't, that might be a little snakier than what it is, but like they'll always trust you on what you have to offer them, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like they may buy your stuff if you have a product that you want to sell, or they're just willing to amplify your presence, right? By like sharing your content with friends. It's really interesting because when you think about it, especially with the internet these days and with YouTube, right? Like you can reach an infinite audience. I mean, like I emailed you after watching your YouTube videos. We wouldn't have even met like 20 years ago, right? Like and you and I, we grew up like with the internet as well, so that's showing you like how far advanced the technology has come in that time. But yeah, it's just kind of this concept of having like the smallest number of people that you can influence, and that's enough. Like if you think about it, if you had, and the author of that essay, Kevin Kelly, he I think he poses the idea, if you had 1,000 people who were willing to pay you $10 a month, you would be making $10,000 a month. And $10, asking 1,000 people for $10 with the internet and its infinite scalability doesn't really seem like such a difficult proposition these days. And especially with you, again, if 1,000 out of almost 50,000 people, that's not even, what percentage is that? I can't even do the math in my head.
It's a 50. It's a 50th, right? I mean, it's pretty good odds, 2%.
Yeah.
2%? Nah, I don't know. I don't know. Don't make me mad.
Like, yeah, we're not.
usually in post we can make fun of me right here, but yeah, a 50th. Like I would say it's honestly, yeah, that's like, I think for 50,000 subscribers, like I would be like, yeah, certainly I can get 10 people to sign up for my course, right? But if I could get 1,000 people to sign up, then man, yeah, I would be truly flattered and, happy with that. But I'm taking it one day at a time. Like if people, don't want to buy my course and they want to watch my content, that's equally cool and equally meaningful to me. So, man, I'm good. I'm good either way. Like This is the best year of my life. Everyone wants to make 2020 to be kind of this horrible thing, right? And you know what it is? It's been a very sad year. It's been very difficult in a lot of different ways. There's been a lot of divisiveness, but it's on every person to make what they can out of that year, make it the best that they can. And so for me, I turned 30, I had a daughter, and I started my YouTube channel, and I started, a couple of new Airbnbs, and I'm growing as a creator and as a creative in a way that I never thought possible. So yeah, I mean, even with everything going on, I have made it my goal and my mission to make this the best year of my life. And it is. It is. I had my daughter, nothing can ever take that away from me at all. And I'll always be grateful to 2020 for what it gave me. And you know what? I have the same exact feeling and vision for 2021 when I'm 31, that's going to be the best year of my life because I'm going to make it the best year of my life. It's on us as creators to make that happen. It's not going to happen, you know, without us working for it, you know?
Dude, that's awesome, man. I can't even end this podcast on a better note, honestly. That is, you couldn't have scripted that in a better way to wrap up this episode, Rob, man. That's really inspiring what you said, right? Like, I think we can all really learn from that and just trying to make the best out of what we have, you know? There's like this saying, like, that may be falsely attributed to Winston Churchill, like never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, it's really awesome to hear that you've been doing that yourself in 2020. And man, I'd love to do like a round 2 at some point, you know,
Sure,
probably
yeah.
once you have like, you probably be at like 1 million subscribers next year, you know, like,
Man.
Who knows, but there's so many.
If I'm at 1 million subscribers 1 year from now, I will buy you a Chipotle burrito.
Okay, hey man, that's a bet. Like, let's do that. I'll take a Chipotle burrito. Get me some chips and guac too. Will you do that as well?
Absolutely, man.
Okay.
You know what? You can have 2 burritos. I'll buy one for you, for whoever else you want.
Okay, that's
man.
great.
If I could, yeah. Obviously, that's a cool goal, but you know, considering that I thought I would be at 5,000 subscribers in 2 or 3 years from now, the fact that I'm where I'm at now, I'm super happy and thrilled and flattered and heartwarmed and everything in between. So if in a year from now I have 50,000, only 5,000 more, I'm going to be grateful because I never thought I'd be here to begin with.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for coming on the show, and it was awesome chatting with you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to doing round 2.
Thanks a ton to Rob for coming on the show. If you want to learn more about him, if you want to catch up with him, watch his content, we've got links to his YouTube channel, his Instagram, his website, other information in the podcast show notes and in the YouTube show description if you are watching the video. So make sure to check that out. And if you really enjoyed this interview, make sure to leave us a review wherever it is that you are tuned into podcasts. It's really awesome. You can leave us a comment as well on the YouTube video if you decide to do that. That'd be awesome. Love hearing from you. And make sure you subscribe to our email list. We've got links to that in the podcast show notes and in the YouTube video description. It's the best way to stay up to date with all the new content that were created in association with the Videocraft Show. So until next time, we'll be seeing you, and thanks for tuning in.